Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending our third installment of our Women's History Month celebration. Our theme this year has been empowerment, and each of our featured speakers is a leader at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. We've had the pleasure of discussing the invisible labor of working moms, as well as learning about global women's rights issues, migration, and barriers to services. Today, we will continue with our theme, and I'm eager to welcome our keynote for this afternoon. But before we begin our program, I would like to invite our Chief of Staff, Zulay Rojas, for a few welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Director Brofman. On behalf of Executive Director Lassiter, I just want to welcome you all to this brave space. I hope that you are able to learn something new about the science of sisterhood via our Director of Education, Director Chang. And though our Executive Director would have loved to have been present to give these opening remarks, he is traveling currently in a place called St. Mary's, finishing up his beloved community tour. So please strap on your metaphoric seatbelts as Director Chang gets ready to provide you with an amazing presentation. Enjoy, and I will pass it on to
Back
Director
to me.
Chang.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm excited now to have our speaker take over the floor. But before I do, I'd love to share a snippet of her bio. Desireé Chang serves as the Director of Education and Outreach for the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. Desireé has been with the PHRC for over 5 years. Prior to becoming the Director of Education and Outreach, she worked as a civil rights mediator with the PHRC Mediation Division. During her tenure at the PHRC, Desireé has received the Director of Excellence Award in 2020, the PHRC Social Justice Team Award in 2021, and the Employee of the Year Central Office in 2023. Most recently, she was recognized as one of the 2024 PA City and State Above and Beyond honorees. She is a graduate of the Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Institute in 2021 and the Commonwealth Leadership Institute in 2023. Desireé has been recognized for her participation on several committees and community social justice collaborative efforts. And after that amazing bio, I'm so pleased to introduce Director Desireé Chang.
Thank you so much, Chief of Staff Rojas and Director Brothman, for the opening remarks and the reading of my bio. And thank you, everyone that has taken time out of your day. I know we are incredibly busy in all of our respective works, and so I really appreciate those of you that has dedicated an hour to being here with me and everyone else this afternoon. So I want to thank you for joining today's presentation on the science of sisterhood, how women support women. When we were asked by our executive director almost a year ago now if we would commit to being featured, I had a very different idea of different topics that I was going to consider. But as the time approached and things were changing at rapid rate, both personally and professionally, I realized the importance of kind of taking things back to this idea of advocacy, but advocacy that effectuates change, and understanding how relationships with women are so pivotal and crucial in the world of advocacy. And so my topic shifted to that, and I am excited to be able to share it with you all today. So today we're going to explore the powerful intersection of science, culture, and community. I want to focus on how these elements contribute to the empowerment of women and the advocacy for gender equality. At the heart of the discussion today will lie the concept of sisterhood, the deep bonds of support, solidarity, and collective action that women share across diverse backgrounds and experiences. From a scientific perspective, I want to delve into how these connections positively impact mental and physical health, how they promote a sense of belonging and well-being. Research shows that strong, supportive relationships among women are linked to reduced stress, enhanced resilience, and overall improved life satisfaction. These bonds foster empowerment, helping women to navigate challenges, break barriers, and uplift one another. In addition, I want to look at how cultural influences shape our understanding of what sisterhood is, but more importantly, what sisterhood looks like, both from a historical narratives perspective looking at women's solidarity and social movements to the evolving role of women in today's society. Sisterhood not only empowers individuals, but also strengthens communities, allowing women to advocate for change on a larger scale. By understanding the science behind sisterhood and its cultural significance, we can better appreciate how collective action among women fuels positive change. It inspires advocacy and it helps create communities rooted in support, equality, and shared purpose. So without further ado, I want to dive into what sisterhood is, not just a concept, but it is in fact a science and how it influences and shapes our everyday lives. So I want to start here with two definitions of sisterhood that I was able to find through a very quick Google search. The first is Oxford Dictionary's version of sisterhood, which states sisterhood is known as the feeling of kinship with and closeness to a group of women or all women. And while I love this definition, it's the second definition that really resonated with me and kind of dictated the way I was going to craft this presentation this afternoon. And the second definition was offered by Merriam-Webster, also found through Google, but it states the solidarity of women based on shared conditions, experiences, or concerns. And like I said, that one in particular resonated with me because we understand traditional sisterhood from a definitional standpoint as being recognized as having a sister, a sibling. But not all of us are afforded that opportunity. As an only child myself, I would say that I have a unique appreciation for the concept of sisterhood because I don't have it in the traditional context. So I am blessed to have a circle of females that have been in my life from anywhere from 10 to 20 years. In total, I say that I have 6 rocks, 6 pillars that have shaped and formed my life. I know most people decorate their home with, collections and arts and things that are of interest to them, but almost always you're going to find a photo or a collection of photos of family members within people's homes. And my home is no different. But last year, when I had a milestone happen within my personal life, I felt like it was crucial to make sure that I had a picture taken of me with those 6 women because I wanted for me to be reminded every single day of the power of our collective, but also for my son to see those women every single day when he walks through that hallway in our home, and also any visitors to our home to be able to see these women again and what they mean to me because we display family, and for me, they are family. They are, in fact, my sisters. Truly, I don't know what my life would look like if I didn't have each one of them in my life. And we've been through beautiful times, things like marriages, the births of our children, accomplishments and accolades in the professional space. But what I believe has bonded us were the trying times, the times of grief, the child rearing stages like the terrible twos and the 3-nager stages that many of us are familiar with. Some of them are approaching or kind of in the thick of the preteen hormonal stages. We've seen each other through pivotal life shifts like divorces and deaths and pandemics, and times that challenged our own individual capacities to get up and show up on some days. And so for me, it's those times that I believe has solidified not what I would consider relationships, but truly life ties. I consider them my tethers, and I wouldn't know what to do without every single one of them. It was the support and carrying of one another when we didn't have the ability to bear the weights of life alone, showing up for each other and carrying those weights on behalf of whoever needed it at the time that was being challenged so that that person could take a moment just to breathe, to regroup and regain her footing, to again step back in and show up in all of the ways that life requires of her. So for me, this is what sisterhood looks like. And this is what I was reflecting on when developing this presentation. I know that I am blessed to have not 1 and not 2, but 6 women that have been in my life for a minimum of a decade, and most of them 2. Sisterhood in this context is the closest thing to magic that I know of because it changes the trajectory of democracies. It bears and builds the next generation of leaders, and it empowers not just one another, but all forms of humanity. Boys and men, little girls and women, it spans age, it spans identities, and it spans generations. And so it is this idea of sisterhood that I want you all to consider as we go through the rest of the presentation this afternoon. So let's look at the science, the true science of sisterhood and how it is in fact within our genes. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of nerdiness for those of you that have any interactions with me or have been in the audience of any of the trainings that I provided, then you know I'm a self-proclaimed nerd. I take a lot of pride in that. I love data, I love facts, I love information. And so today's presentation would not be a presentation provided by me if it didn't include those pieces. And so I want to share with you all the science, the true science of sisterhood. So the idea that females are genetically hardwired for traits like empathy and collaboration has in fact been explored both biologically and psychologically through these perspectives, through countless research papers and studies and tests and so on. And so while there is no single female gene for empathy or collaboration, various scientific studies that indicate that genetic and hormonal factors may in fact influence how these traits are manifested in women. So the first is oxytocin. Most people are familiar with it. It is kind of referred to as the bonding hormone, sometimes also referred to as the love hormone. But oxytocin plays a crucial role in promoting social bonding, empathy, and nurturing behaviors. It is in fact higher in women, and particularly during times of pregnancy, childbirth, breastfeeding, things that would contribute to enhanced empathy and caregiving behaviors that we would need during those times. Another hormone that has been identified that's predominantly present in females is estrogen, which again, probably not new information, but strongly influenced and linked to this idea of sisterhood because it's strongly linked to emotional processing and empathy. Some research suggests that higher levels of estrogen are associated with a greater ability to recognize and respond to others' emotions. And so from that, there's been some data out there to indicate that women, in fact, have higher levels of emotional intelligence as a result of those elevated levels of estrogen. Also, we know, obvious genetic differences between males and females. And so there may in fact be sex-specific genetic factors that affect brain structures. So we understand chromosomally, women have 2 chromosomes, 2 copies of the X chromosome, while men only have 1. And some research has indicated that as a result of that double X chromosome, women exhibit patterns differently related to characteristics like empathy and collaboration. So again, we're seeing this actual science that is supporting this idea of sisterhood and the benefits that come along with them. Number 2 that you all have there on your screen is the brain structure and brain function. So social cognitive processing. Research has shown that women tend to activate brain regions related to social cognition more readily than men. Social cognition, for those of you that don't know, it's developed in later childhood, early adolescence, but it's the piece in our development where we become aware, keenly aware, not only of our own feelings, thoughts, and motives, but those of others, emotions that others are feeling and demonstrating through behaviors and the mental states of others. So all of this, again, is at play as it relates to social cognition development and specifically with women. There's this system that we all have called the mirror neuron system, and it's responsible for understanding others' actions and emotions as well. And some studies suggest that women may in fact have enhanced mirror neuron activity, again, contributing to the stronger ability to feel empathy and be able to collaborate with others on deeper levels than our male counterparts. And then what else we have here is evolutionary evolutionary biology. So from an evolutionary perspective, some theories suggest that traits like empathy and cooperation may have been advantageous for the survival and nurturing of offspring. Women who traditionally played a larger role in child rearing may have developed stronger empathetic and collaborative traits to ensure the survival of their own children. And then finally, we understand this social theory of kin selection, which is this you before me type of theory. And this idea that we put others or help others, specifically relatives, those that we have shared genes with, above ourselves in order to maintain the survival and carry on the generations. And again, this is a responsibility more heavily related to women than men. And then lastly, we're talking about the science and the data, the psychological differences. So some psychological suggest that women might be more prone to adopt an other-oriented focus. Again, that you before me, that putting their children or those that they care for before themselves and their own needs and interests. And we see this in family and society even today. And this contributes to a stronger drive for emotional support and cooperation as a result of women tending to put their children or those that they're caring for, their spouses, their loved ones, before themselves. Now, it needs to be noted that while I've already shared with you some genetic, hormonal, and neurological factors that may influence traits like empathy and collaboration that are, again, more highly demonstrated in women's and groups of women, it's also important to recognize that there is a complex interplay of genetics and environment, and that culture also plays a crucial role in shaping the behaviors. And so there is a wide range as it relates to individual variation. So I'm just giving you some generalizations related to these scientific contributors, but there is, always a variation, and we still see some of these behaviors and traits obviously exhibited in our male counterparts. So with that, let's move to, like I said, the things that really had me thinking about sisterhood and bonding. And it really is this idea of our shared values, our shared experiences. So it's not only biological and psychological research that supports this concept of sisterhood. The notion of sisterhood itself has been built on shared understanding of the obligations and responsibilities women hold within cultures. I already shared, for me, that's one of the biggest things as it relates to the bonds and the ties that I have with my women's circle. It's our shared lived experience and them feeling like they see me, right? Beyond just the title of mom or the title of spouse or the title of director. They see me in all of my beauty and all of my strengths, but in all of my pain and all of my struggles. And that is, in fact, where women and sisterhood itself, that's where it stems from. So gender, like politics or even the economy, is in fact a social construct. It's a system built by and maintained through human society. While it's not a natural force, it's just as deeply woven into our lives as any other natural structure. Gender shapes us both materially and culturally, affecting us on personal and societal levels. While it may not be inherent, it exists wherever human communities do. And gender norms stem back to what I call our original society, so prehistoric times. And there's a ton of research on prehistory that has focused on uncovering the vital role women played in early societies, the tasks that they typically performed, and believed to have contributed to a significant sexual division of labor, especially when it comes to, again, those things that we see even today, child rearing, the gathering or collecting of the needs and the items for the home, and other essential daily activities. This division of responsibilities has been perpetuated through our evolution as people and fully adopted into the American culture. When we think about the quote unquote traditional American family from the 40s to the 60s, almost all of the examples follow suit with these gender expectations. The men displayed in television and film are often shown leaving the home, going out to earn a wage, while the women remained within the home, taking care of the domestic responsibilities and any children if they had them. We know this was the standard and the acceptable adaptation of how a family was to function in American society in the 40s through the 60s. And in fact, many of our current social systems and structures, and even some of our laws, were built and continue to be perpetuated around this composition of family. Culture and social discourses also play a critical role related to women in society, as well as women to women relationships. So if you are in a woman's body, then you are keenly aware of the social stereotypes related to this identity, not even to consider intersecting identities. And we will talk about that briefly. But just three things had come to mind when crafting this presentation, just three negative stereotypes that we know being in a woman's body are associated with us. We are told, or it's stated pretty broadly, that we're too emotional. We're always compared to being or considered to be more physically weak than our male counterparts, and maybe in some regards, but when you take into consideration the load that we bear, both physically and the invisible labor that Director Mack had shared with us 2 weeks ago, then we are far from weak in comparison. And also this idea that we're not good leaders. We still see some disparities as it relates to female representation in leadership across all sectors. And yet it is, in fact, these very stereotypes that have forced women to push beyond these perceived limitations to prove not only their worth, but to command respect in spaces beyond just the domicile. After the 1960s, feminists started to shift their discourses toward the role of women in society, shaping their campaigns with a new set of tools and targets inspired by the civil rights movement. And so I want you all just to take a moment to look at the categories on the screen and consider how they might resonate with you. Think about if you are fortunate to have bonds and ties to other women, and if you're not a woman yourself, but you know of women in your world or in your life, and you know those relationships exist, think about those. I want you just to take a moment and see the ways in which we connect and how sisterhood is formed through our shared experiences, through our common aspirations, through cultural connections, and then, of course, social causes. But when I just did an evaluation of this myself, I looked at motherhood. As I mentioned, that group of, my women cohort, we all happen to be mothers. And so one of the things that I know that we bonded over very early on in our motherhood journeys, but really had brought each of us, I think, a sense of peace as we, entered into this new identity of mom, was mom guilt. And being able to share that candidly and authentically with other moms that knew you before you were a mom, and could put your mind at ease that, unfortunately, this is something that comes with the beauty of mothering as well. Caregiving, also, a shared experience that we learned from Director Mack 2 weeks ago when she had shared the invisible labor of working moms, that even in homes where there is a male counterpart supporting that family dynamic and that working mom, the research still indicates that the primary responsibility of caregiving falls on moms. And so I just invite you to reflect on this and think about it. If you're not a woman or you don't have a circle of women, thinking about some of these things and how it is, in fact, the challenge many times and the difficult moments that allows us to lean on one another and realize that we are, in fact, seen and heard and respected and valued in all of the different roles that we play. So just to give a couple examples, some historical examples of where we've seen sisterhood be successful in our American history, we have 4 that I shared, and then of course number 5 is what I called the rollback or the attempted rollback. But just to go through a little bit of these, the women's suffrage movement is one of the first sisterhood causes that we know of in our American history. It occurred in the mid 1900s, but the history of American women's rights movements is in fact a testament to the resilience, courage, and determination of countless women who fought for equality, justice, and freedom to define their own destinies. Again, starting from the suffrage movement to the civil rights movement to the modern day Me Too movement that most of us are very familiar with, and then continuing on in that journey towards gender equality within our United States. It continues to be long and challenging and often led, though, by groundbreaking women who changed the course of history because they are empowered and emboldened and supported in a way that they know that they not only should, but can. So I just want to give a little bit of information again about each one of these examples, just so we can really feel what this struggle and what these challenges look like, but living in 2025, what the benefits were then and have continued to be for generations to come. So the women's suffrage movement is one of the earliest and most influential campaigns for women's rights in the United States. As I mentioned, it began in the mid 19th century, and it was a time where women were largely excluded from political and legal processes. And so despite these restrictions, a small but determined group of women began to push for change. So one of the first attempts was actually 1848 in Seneca Falls. And they had made significant efforts, but continued to go with challenge. And so it wasn't until the 1920, with the passing of the 19th Amendment, that granted women the right to vote. So again, the effort started in 1848, and it took all the way until 1940 for law to catch up with the effort. Where was I? Oh, so the victory marked a significant turning point in the political landscape of the United States and proved that when women unite in purpose and perseverance, they can change the world. Our next example, while oftentimes associated with racial equity, and in fact there is an important fact or component to it to look at, which is the intersectionality of women's as well as race-based rights. So while the suffrage movement secured a key victory, the struggle for equality continued, especially for African American or Black women. The civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s focused on ending racial segregation and discrimination, but it also highlighted that intersectionality of gender and race. And for many African American women, the fight for civil rights was inextricably tied to the fight for gender equality. And so both of those efforts were being sought simultaneously for Black women during the civil rights era. And women that we know of, some that are very familiar in household names, especially in the month of February, like Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat, and Ella Baker, a key organizer in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. They were instrumental in this movement. These women not only fought against racial oppression, but they also challenged the gender norms and sought to confine them fought against those gender norms that sought to confine them to the home and to what were traditional gender roles. We then move into the 60s and 70s with the feminist movement. And this was a new wave of feminism that emerged. It was, again, spurred by the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement and countercultural shifts. It was, again, referred to as kind of the second wave of feminism. But what that did was take a deeper look, and it called for greater legal, social, and economic equality for women. And so some of the pivotal women during this era were Betty Friedman and Gloria Steinman and Shirley Chisholm, who led the movement and advocated for women's rights in education, in the workplace, and reproductive freedom. And one of the most well-known achievements of this period was the passage of Title IX of the Educational Amendments of 1962. And this prohibited discrimination based on sex in educational programs and activities. And what Title IX did was really open doors for women in education and sports, and it empowered countless young women to pursue careers that were only reserved for men prior to this. And so the feminist movement faced challenges like all of these other movements as well, But in particular, women of color face the greatest amount of challenge as it related to the second wave feminist movement. Um, intersectionality was not viewed as through a lens of value at that time, and we siloed the interests of Caucasian women from that of African American women, which again created this disparity even through these efforts to move us into a direction of equality for all women. And then, of course, most of us are familiar with the Me Too movement. It started in the early 2000s, but really became, I think, common knowledge and well known throughout a lot of different communities and mainstream media by 2017 into 2019. It was a hashtag, so it followed our tech movements. But in the 21st century, the Me Too movement emerged as a response to widespread sexual harassment and assault. And it was an initiative that needed to be elevated. Again, those of us in female bodies, we understand the sexualization of our bodies at very young ages. Some of us with additional marginalized, minoritized identities like Black women and Latino women that are known to develop physically earlier and have more voluptuous physical traits are sexualized at much younger ages. And so the need to elevate this conversation had been long standing. And finally, we saw this conversation being brought to the forefront of all of our, not just our minds, but our conversations. And so this movement was founded by Tarana Burke. She was actually the image in my third slide. And she founded the movement and as I said, the early 2000s, 2006, in fact, but it wasn't until 2017. So 11 years later, it took for her movement to, again, make mainstream media and really elevate this long needed conversation. What happened with the Me Too movement, though, was incredible. It sparked global conversations, particularly about the abuses of power in industries like entertainment, like politics, like media. Women who had been silenced for years began to speak out, with public revelations about powerful men prompting significant cultural shifts. And the Me Too movement not only held individuals accountable, but also challenged societal norms, advocating for a culture where women are treated with dignity and respect, not just as sexual beings. And it was an incredible movement that we had seen again in this generation. While we are one, maybe two generations removed from even the civil rights movement, for some of our younger women, it feels like a lifetime away from them. And so the Me Too movement was necessary in giving them a contemporary example of what widespread advocacy not only looks like, but what it can do for society. And so let's move on. I know I still have some time, but I also want to leave some time for engagement. So let's talk about the importance of celebrating our differences. As I had mentioned, even during the second wave of feminism, this idea of seeing women in not just their gender identity, but also in their other identities. If they were African American women or Latino women, that was not being done. That additional layer of identity was used as a reason to create more of a divide, as opposed to what the intention was to make it more cohesive and advance it for everyone. And so as we continue on our pursuits in 2025 and on, we need to make sure that we're celebrating these differences, that we are seeing real value in intersectionality, and that we're having conversations around intersectionality. To achieve true gender equity for all women, it is essential for us to leverage inclusivity and understanding across all facets of society. Gender equity goes beyond the simple idea of equal rights and opportunities. It's about dismantling systemic barriers that prevent women from accessing the same opportunities and resources as men. However, true equity cannot be achieved if we do not first understand and embrace the vast diversity of experiences that women face. These experiences are shaped by a multitude of intersecting identities. Things like I've already mentioned, things like race, but also class, sexuality, ability, cultural backgrounds. As such, one size fits all approach to gender equity will not suffice. Instead, we need a comprehensive and inclusive framework that addresses these unique challenges. Inclusivity in this particular context means recognizing the voices and needs of all women, especially those from marginalized communities, those who more often than are non-marginalized because of other identities women face at more significant and more frequent rates. These women who often face additional layers of discrimination that we don't always want to lean into and recognize. But women of color, LGBTQ plus women, and women with disabilities, immigrant women, women from low income backgrounds, they in fact frequently experience gender-based inequality differently, more pervasive, more intensely than their privileged counterparts, despite the fact that we share one marginalized identity of gender. Without including these diverse voices in conversations about gender equity, solutions will remain incomplete and continue to fail to reach those who need them most. By actively engaging with amplifying the experiences of these women and all women, we ensure that our understanding of gender equity is more holistic and capable of creating lasting change. So how do we do that? Just one example is through amplifying the voices, but pairing them with decision-making power. We ask for the stories. We ask for the challenge. We ask for the trauma to be exposed so that we can learn and we can understand if we're not in that body or we don't have that lived experience. But one thing that our democracy has failed to do is put power in the hands of those that have been historically marginalized and minoritized. And so we ask for the exposure of trauma for our own educational benefit, but yet we're not willing to give the reins in order for decisions to be made by these individuals that will not only benefit them, but benefit the greater majority. And so as it just relates to women, we need to be creating environments, things like advisory boards and leadership positions within government, within our nonprofits, within our business sectors, all of them, that specifically focus on the needs of underrepresented women, such as Indigenous women or women from low-income backgrounds or any of the other examples that I provided. I do want to give a shout out to the PHRC for being one entity and organization that has done this through action. Our senior leadership team is mostly, at this point, comprised of women, but even before that, the women within the PHRC are invited to share their stories and their lived experiences and afforded an opportunity to use their skill sets in other areas of interest and other areas to benefit the agency as a whole. We also are incredibly blessed in our Commonwealth to have a governor that has implemented a very similar approach. The Shapiro and Davis administration, we know they have several affinity advisory commissions that focus on amplifying the concerns of marginalized groups. We have our AAPI commission, we have our Commission on African American Affairs, we have our Commission on Women's Interests, and so on and so forth. And so we do have a Commonwealth that is structured around this idea of not just amplifying voices, but pairing it with some power in order to really effectuate change. Understanding the diverse challenges that women face is equally crucial, and so it involves more than just acknowledging the differences and asking for the stories. It requires an ongoing commitment to learning, to empathy, and again, to action. So with that, I want to move on and shift just a little bit about, again, some data, because while I already shared with everyone here some historical examples of successes and strides that we have in fact made, there is still a lot of work to be done. And so I just want to share with this group just some of the challenges that we continue to see, some of the disparities that still exist. And so I want to provide you with just a couple of these examples of data that reinforce the need to continue these advancements and to continue these efforts as a collective. One example is the gender wealth and gender pay gap. So overall earnings in 2023 Women working full-time jobs earned approximately 83 cents for every dollar earned by men. So movement in a positive direction. 2 to 3 years ago, we were still 60 cents to the dollar. And so we are seeing some positive movement, but we're still not dollar for dollar. And so there still needs to be efforts put there. We also are still continuing to see occupational disparities. Some of the most substantial pay gaps exist in the financial and insurance sectors, where men earn an average of just under $104,000 per year when we look at salaries in 2022, but women working in those same sectors and those same fields and holding some of those same positions, their annual salaries were an average of $62,000. So we're seeing almost a $40,000 difference in salary. And again, we're not just looking at in one role that these women are holding. Many times these women are professionals, yes, but they may be spouses, they may be caregivers, they may be parents, they may have hobbies and so on and so forth. And so having a $40,000 salary difference for the exact same job in 2025, we have a lot more work to do. And then of course we know the racial and ethnic differences. The imbalance is more pronounced among women of color. Black women earn 64 cents and Latino women earn 51 cents for every dollar earned by white non-Hispanic men in 2023. So I shared with you the first stat that women generally were 83 cents to every dollar. But when you again add in that added layer of identity, of race, then we're seeing those gaps widen. We're still at 64 for African American women and only 50% for Latino women. And so we're also still seeing some disparities in other areas of representation. So we know in the political arena, there's still a very wide gap as it relates to representation. Congressional seats as of February 2024, women held only 29%, despite the fact that when we look at the national average population, women are about 50% of the total population. So we're only seeing a quarter, almost a third of that represented in the political arena. And then we believe that this played a part in the 2024 presidential election. So again, regardless of side, we do know, though, that presidential-elect Harris lost and continued to experience challenges and standards that were much higher and much more stringent than others that were running that identified and present as men. And those of us, again, in female bodies, while there was a lot of discussion and men will refute that gender played any type of a role in her ability to secure the seat, we know as women that, or at least we believe very strongly, many of us, that it did in fact play a role, that our democracy isn't yet ready to have a woman leading the entire country. Now, one positive is that when we're looking at educational attainment, college-educated workforce women now constitute 51% of the U.S. workforce. So again, positive movements, but still additional work to be done because those numbers are much higher in comparison to our male counterparts. So, like I said, we've made some amazing strides, and we need to continue those efforts, though, because our gaps are still very prevalent and prominent, particularly for certain groups. And so I want to turn us back again to that science, to that data when we're talking about sisterhood. So I purposefully titled this, Sisterhood is Good for the Soul, because the research and data says it is in fact good for the soul. So when women connect to one another, a variety of biological and psychological processes come into play. Social connections trigger the release of oxytocin, which we already talked about, but it also plays a role in forming social bonds because of that bonding or love hormone, whatever you want to use or however you want to describe it. But that increased oxytocin also has been linked to a reduction of stress and promoting feelings of trust and empathy between women. So oxytocin helps foster emotional connection and creates a sense of safety and belonging, which is why women who share supportive relationships may experience reduced anxiety and heightened well-being. And I can tell you, when we have our mom date, we say it's for the kids, it's for us. And I always walk away feeling better, truly. Additionally, interacting with others can lower cortisol levels, so the hormone associated with stress. Social support from other women can buffer the negative effects of stress and promote feelings of happiness and contentment. The positive impact of social connections also involves the release of endorphins, which are chemicals in the brain, most of us are familiar, that enhance mood and can produce the quote unquote feel good sensation, contributing to improved emotional health. Psychologically connecting with other women allows for the sharing of experiences, which can help validate feelings, create a sense of solidarity, and even lead to collaborative problem solving. These interactions strengthen resilience, improve mental health, and offer a sense of empowerment. So, in short, the biological effects of connecting with others, particularly women connecting with other women, can enhance both emotional and physical well being because of that release of oxytocin, those endorphins, and those feelings of closeness, stress reduction, and feelings of belonging. So, as we approach our conclusion, I want to just give you all a moment to reflect on the questions. I want to leave some time for some questions, but if anyone feels so inclined to look at one of the questions on the screen and answer it candidly, feel free to come off and mute. But as I'd mentioned, while we have made incredible strides with our efforts in gender equality and gender equity, we still have a long way to go. And so it's not just our generation, but it's empowering and emboldening the next generation of women and men alike to be able to pick up the baton, if you will, and keep moving it forward. And so a couple questions had come to mind, and again, that's why I shared them with you all, just to have a moment. If you want to reflect internally, great. But if you feel compelled to share, I'd love to hear someone else's reflection on one of the questions.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
I can.
Thank you, Director Chang, for this presentation. I think it's important that we have spaces like this where we only talk about sisterhood and talk about how women can support one another, the biological and physiological impacts of such, and just our advancement in society. I think I am grateful for, and I have very few friends, but I am grateful for those that speak my name in spaces where I'm not where I don't have access to or where I'm not privy to, because what happens behind my back may not be in any of my business, but I love that there are individuals who are defending me, uplifting me, and supporting me even without my knowledge. And I think that's a true testament to, sisterhood, the support, and the way that we can move forward and continue to uplift ourselves as women. In society, it's always, women against women, or you always see this portrayed in the media, or they're always talking about how, this woman is, going against this woman. It's very divisive. And I just think if we all can transcend to understand exactly what you were talking about, the advocacy, the empowerment, that we need one another in order to, continue our forward movement in society, that we will be in such a much better place. And so thank you for holding this space for that. I was answering one of the questions here. What is the best piece of advice I would give to the next generation? And it's simply just supporting one another. Continue to uplift, because we have enough, enemies, I'll say, but we have enough people against us that we need to be there for one another. And so thank you again for this space, and let's just continue, and thank you for being who you are.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Supervisor Edwards. And I appreciate you being bold enough to come off and share with the group, knowing that we are being recorded at the moment. So again, if no one else feels comfortable, I fully understand, and we are approaching kind of the end of our time, but I just want you all to take a moment, think about the women. We all come from women. If that woman isn't your example, hopefully throughout your time in your walk of life, you have one. I wish for everyone to have 6 or more like I do. They are incredible beings and bring so much to my life and so much to my son's life. And, I hope and I believe that I bring a lot to them, to theirs, and to their children's lives as well. So just take some time, think about it. If you have a woman in your life that comes to mind, maybe reach out to her today and let her know. Happy Women's History Month. And I was thinking about you, and, you came to mind during the conversation. So with that, I'll do a wrap up, and I also want to share with everyone a video before we end. So my conclusion is just this. We've explored the powerful science of sisterhood. We've uncovered both cultural insights and scientific data that highlight its profound impact on women's lives. From the release of the oxytocin during moments of connection to the psychological benefits of shared experiences, it's clear that the bonds women form with one another are not just emotional, they're biologically grounded, creating real health and resilience benefits. We've also examined historical examples of women's advocacy where collective action, solidarity, and mutual support led to the monumental social change. From the suffragists who fought for the right to vote to modern movements like Me Too, history has proven that when women stand together, they are unstoppable. They are an unstoppable force for progress. The need to continue leading into the concept of sisterhood is more urgent than ever. We must support each other, amplify one another's voices, and recognize the strength in our diversity. As we move forward, it's crucial that we honor the work of those who have paved the way for us, while also building our own legacies to address the challenges women face today. The science of sisterhood shows us that we are, in fact, stronger together. And when we unite in pursuit of gender equity, we can create lasting change for women everywhere. Let us commit to nurturing these connections, empowering each other, and ensuring that the next chapter in the history of women's advocacy is even more impactful than the last. The work continues, and together we will shape a more just and equitable future for all women in all of our identities. So before we wrap, I just want to share, for those of you that seen this, bear with me, but it was an incredible campaign during the Summer Olympics last year. And I love it. And I shared it with that circle I talk about, and I hope that you all enjoy it in the way that I did. So thank you everyone again for giving an hour of your time this afternoon to be with me to learn about the science of sisterhood. And I hope that you've taken something away from this presentation this afternoon. I will also do our wrap up as just a reminder. We do have weekly features in honor of Women's History Month. And so our final featured speaker is Regional Director of the Pittsburgh area, Dr. LaDawn Robinson, who will present another poignant topic, Success Looks Different at Every Stage, Embrace the Journey. As I always say at the end of each of these, if you don't already, please follow our social media pages and platforms so that you can stay abreast of all of the various events and initiatives that are happening at the PHRC. And so again, I thank each of you for being here and committing to being present in my presentation.
That was fantastic. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I just wanted to share some things that we're seeing in the chat. Caroline Eister said, kudos Director Chang on this straightforward and data-backed approach in constructing this virtual and still tangible approach in our quest for equality and empowerment. Marie Miller said, Director Chang, you are an amazing speaker. And then we have Denise Walker who said, thank you for this presentation. Sandra Crawford, well done, Director Chang. Michelle Smith, thank you. Lots of thank yous and great job coming in. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And it was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you so much. I will hang back since we still have a few minutes left if anybody has any questions, or we can probably stop recording. Thank you, everyone.